Welcome to Heart, where we break the silence, bridge the gaps, and bring real conversations about mental health to the forefront. I'm your host, Lee Yaffe, founder and director of The Long Short Road. Welcome back to Heart, everyone. Today we're joined by Sam Salz, the only Orthodox Jewish player in Division I football. At just 5'6" and without prior football experience, Sam walked onto the Texas A&M's powerhouse SEC team through sheer grit, discipline, and faith. He's inspired thousands worldwide through his speaking engagements, sharing his journey of resilience, values, and perseverance. Sam is passionate about showing people how obstacles can become opportunities and how staying true to your faith and purpose can fuel both personal achievement and collective success. And on a personal note, this is a very cool interview for me to be doing because I've known Sam, as I call him, Sammy, for a very long time. I think probably since he was in 8th or 9th grade. So this is really cool for me to do. Hi, Sam. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
This is awesome. Okay, so can we just start with, can you please tell me your why? You know, like
Yeah,
as a 5'6" like kid with no prior experience end up on a Division I football team. I just walk us through that.
for sure. Well, I mean, obviously, like the why I always say is the most important thing for anything or any goal that you have that you want to accomplish. And so when it came down to why I wanted to do it in the first place, there was two reasons. So the first one was obviously, I think that nowadays in the Jewish world, there is, for lack of a better word, not enough showing the youth that you can be successful and do what you really dream about and be religious. So that was obviously important to me to showcase that, that you don't have to give up Shabbat to become successful, jump to give up being an observant Jew to become successful. I think that's an important message that I really wanted to spread. And obviously the other side of it is like just on a broader level, I think it's important to show what you can accomplish in life and what that there's a potential that you have to fulfill. And that's not necessarily just by, getting a degree or sitting in a classroom or, getting an office job. That, what you are meant to do in this world kind of has larger and more far reaching bounds. And I wanted to show people that. And, I don't think there was any better way to show that than, being an undersized kid who never played football, making it onto a Division I team. Right. So like that's kind of if that's what if that's in some regard what I can do, like what can you do?
Wow, that's awesome. Okay, but then can we like take that back for a second? Can you walk me through like how, because I think a lot of people walk through the world thinking like, I can't do things, I'm not good enough, I'm not strong enough, I'm not that. How did you develop the confidence and the grit and the resilience to to accomplish something like this?
Well, I know you know me since I was a kid, so I don't know if necessarily
Oh,
the confidence was something that needed to be developed.
no, that definitely wasn't. And if I could just say one thing, the first time we met, I don't know if you remember this, was Shabbos in the basement of Shul, and you had gone up to make an announcement during Kiddush about starting a hockey team. And I remember
Yeah,
thinking, like, I don't know who this kid is. Like this is very empowering. It was very empowering to see you have that at such a
glad.
young age.
I'm glad. And so like, thank God, obviously, like, I think that in that regard it wasn't lacking, but I think there was also maybe it's natural, maybe I was gifted with it, maybe part of it, obviously, you do work on things because, obstacles get thrown your way and you have to overcome them. But I also kind of just never really cared what people thought about me. So, you know, like I obviously care if people think I'm a good person, I'm a kind person. I care in that regard. But like in terms of like, do I ever care if people think I'm crazy? No, not really. Like, like I think that for me is probably a separating factor in regards to that. But I think it's also just something that people have to generally break past if they want to accomplish something in life. Because I think people hold themselves back more than obstacles and other people can. And
Yeah.
it's like if you really want to accomplish something, the first barrier that you have to break is the one in your own mind.
And it's the stories that we tell ourselves about what we are capable of that stop us. So let me ask you, how do you balance like being Shomer Shabbos and keeping kosher and all of the things? And like a lot of games are on Shabbos. Like how do you navigate that? And also a separate question is, how was that like also explaining it to your team and kind of educating your team about what it is to be an Orthodox Jew?
It's very important to be able to know that because there's always a balance of everything that you have to do in life. And so when it came down to figuring out what I had to do, I think it's people get confused and they try to balance a million things at once in the sense where it's like you're juggling things. I think you have to reorganize the way you see balancing something, and you see like you just layer it in your mind. Okay, like what's priority, what's secondary, what's so when it comes down to that, for me, obviously my relationship with God is Judaism is my priority, right? And so keeping Shabbat and keeping kosher is at the forefront of that. It's the forefront of my purpose and why I do what I do. And because it's at the forefront of my purpose, right? Like everything else I do kind of falls in line where it's like I understand that I'm put in situations because I have something that that is unique that can contribute to those situations that can come out of that. And therefore, there was never any contradiction. So in terms of me balancing everything, obviously, I had to kind of look at the schedule and be like, okay, which games are going to be after Shabbat, which games aren't. There's always that godly side to it, where it's like, God puts you with the right people, God puts you in the right situations and gives you the right thing to say. And so, I came obviously to every practice aside from the ones that were on the Chagim and the ones that were on the fast. And, I just went through and did it. Like I told them, what it was, and thank God they were cool with it. And that's pretty much how I balanced it. When it came down to keeping kosher, I would say more difficult just because, there's kind of a shortage in of kosher restaurants in College Station, believe it or not.
Sure.
And so when it came down to kosher, before I started getting meals from the team, the main, provider of kosher food in College Station really is a Chabad. So, shout out to Chabad at A&M.
That's
But
it.
then, cooking for myself, not really super fun. A lot of experiments, but I think there's a time in life for that.
Right.
But so, and then the team started getting me, kosher food and stuff like that. So thank God I was able to balance all of that.
Wow.
And, plugging that into, my why, like that's what it was. I think, it was important for me to showcase that because, without that, I think it'd be kind of lacking in purpose.
Yeah.
The second question, when you asked me how it was educating my teams, I think my teammates, I think, foremost and forefront, I think, you as a Jew kind of have to be educated, which I don't think, even in the Orthodox world, like a lot of Jews aren't like really understanding or educated on why they do things. And I
Yeah.
think like that's maybe something that we kind of have to go deeper on as a community. But you really have to understand the reasoning for things. And, living in a place like College Station, Texas, which is in the Bible Belt, there's the onus is on you even more. And the reason I say that is because people are educated in the Bible. And when people are educated in the Bible, right, and, that they're trying to explain how Judaism believes and what they believe, you have to be able to, you can't just cite the Shulchan Aruch, right, or the Dakota Jewish law as to why you do something. You have to cite the biblical and scriptural source for doing that. And I think, in that regard, it actually has obviously made me better as more articulate as a Jew and in my Judaism. And, when it came down to explaining it to them, there was always, a general understanding of it. Obviously, like they came with a bunch of questions, but it's important to have those questions fielded to you because you'll get those questions in every situation in life, whether it be from, bosses to your kids to whatever, and you have to understand how to answer them.
Yeah. I just want to take apart that piece that you just shared about the fact that a lot of Orthodox Jews don't know why they're doing what they're doing and like how important that is, I think, for like people, for people of your generation to hear, but also people who are older. Because a lot of us are walking around like we're living from lives. The question is, why are we doing it because somebody told us we're supposed to do it? Okay, and right? Like, yeah.
Right. Like that's, for me, that's another, important thing as maybe a more microcosm of my goal and my why and why I do things. When I do get to go and be in these situations where I can sit across from Jewish kids across all sorts of religious backgrounds. For me, I think it's important to like, sit down and, actually make sure your relationship is, like you're focusing on God in your relationship with Judaism, where
Mm,
it's like, you really can't, you can't get away from that. Where, in all aspects of Judaism, from religious to secular, there's been somewhat of a shift, maybe not a shift, and maybe a thing, but from general belief to a cultural belief, right? And like cultural beliefs can be very positive, but at the same time, cultural beliefs also do share somewhat of a negative response, because when you make your beliefs solely about the culture, you miss out on what's really imperative and actually basic about why you believe in the first place.
Right.
And so, right, like so there are those aspects are important. People have to understand that Judaism isn't just matzo balls, or Judaism isn't just wearing a black hat. Like Judaism is something that's a lot deeper than that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that relationship with God has to be at the forefront.
Right.
Yeah. Right. So if you speak to a lot of young people, you've traveled to a lot of places, you've had the opportunity to speak on a lot of campuses and in different organizations to people from all walks of life. What's your message for people about how they can, like, what if someone doesn't know what it's like to have a relationship with Hashem? Even an Orthodox person who doesn't, like, what does that even look like? How do we start empowering people to figure out what that looks like for them?
I think fundamentally your relationship with God has to come from a good relationship with yourself. And
Okay.
the reason I say that is, you know, I to break it down on a theological belief or like an ideological belief, the way that we look at things and the way that I see it is that, our parents, we're like a microcosm of our parents, right? Like we take traits from them, and we tend to resemble them in some way, shape, or form, right? And if you're going to go through biblical and scriptural, literature, and you're going to look at the same, um, you know, concepts with regard to God, like God is our Father, right? Like what we say in the prayers for the Slichot and on Rosh Hashanah, like Avinu Malkeinu, our Father, our King, and you have that representation of God, being your Father, right? Then clearly, like, and then in Genesis and in Bereshit, it says that people are created Salmenu, right? So they're made in the image of God, or B'Tselem Elokim. That's the verse afterwards. So they're made in the image of God, right? Then clearly your relationship from God also has to start from you having a good relationship with yourself. Because ultimately, if you're made in the image of God, right, and you have that part of God within you, you are inherently part of that.
Right.
And so I think that's important for people to kind of realize, So I think first off, you have to have a good relationship with yourself. And second of all, I think, you also have to be able to take leaps of faith. I think, there's a lot of discussion about risk in life, right? And people, in different walks of life, from different areas, tend to be a little more risk averse. And, we're kind of taught to be that way. And I think having faith, on the intellectual scape tends to be a leap of, like, literally a leap of faith. It tends to be a risk to some people. But realistically, in this world, at least what I've learned is that you have to be able to take risks to succeed, right? And it's whether, and if you're going to apply that to the business world, you're going to apply that to the personal world, right? If you take a risk in the business world and you fail, hopefully you learn from that and you'll become a lot more knowledgeable, right? And if you take a risk and you succeed, you succeed.
Right.
So realistically, taking a risk is actually the lowest risk thing that you can do, because you'll gain something either way.
Right.
And so, I think we kind of have to be more willing to actually assess our situations and figure out what's really risky, right? Like, to me, what's more risky than taking these leaps of faith is, living a life that at 40 you wake up and you're like, why the hell am I doing this? Right? Like, what? Like, you know what I mean? Like, and that for me is the way I see things.
Right.
It's like, people have to do things that they find meaning in. I think I remember, many years ago, not many, a couple of years ago, we did a session. The football team went and did a session with the Corps of Cadets, which is Texas A&M's ROTC. It's like kind of like the spirit of the whole school. And the head general started asking if anybody knew who Viktor Frankl was. And I was the only person in the room that like raised my hand, from what I remember.
Wow.
Right, because obviously, like, thank God Kohelet gave me that education. But Viktor Frankl and his theory, right, on what makes people happy and fulfilled in life, I obviously believe in. Like, I think that people need meaning in their life. They need to be contributing to something greater than themselves, which is ultimately what separates humans from animals. Right? Humans have more than this desire to just kind of survive. They have this desire to influence something that's greater than themselves that maybe they might not even be able to get to see.
You were the only person who knew who Viktor Frankl was. That honestly doesn't surprise me, but also, like, that kind of makes me sad.
I mean, I think I was one of the only ones who raised the hand in the room, but like my hand shot up first, so like he definitely like the general like went and talked, asked me like he's like, can you tell everyone who Viktor Frankl was, and
Wow.
or what book he wrote. So there's something like that.
There's, you just shared so much profound insight in like such a short amount of time. So I kind of want to expand it a little bit. And like one of, this is the area that I'm a specialist in. One of the things that I'm pay attention to the most is like mental health abuse. And like your generation has really been like suffering a lot more than with between social media and COVID and a lot of different factors. I'm seeing a lot more emotional difficulty and strife in people your age group. And one of the things that is so profound to me about what you just shared is about the importance of having a healthy and like good relationship with yourself. Because that's also at the core of mental health, right? How can you thrive and succeed in life if you don't like yourself, if you speak to yourself negatively, if you put yourself down,
Right.
right? Like you're not getting anywhere by hating on yourself. And somehow, though, I think there's gotten somewhere along the way, we've kind of gotten this message that, like, in order to succeed, you have to be tough on yourself. I don't think that's necessarily true. Like, I think you can have grit, but you don't have to be mean to yourself.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a difference between getting down on yourself and understanding that you have to do better. I think that's like kind of you can be hard on yourself in a positive way where it's like I want to be better than what I am right now. And that's not and you should want to do that because that's what ultimately drives success. Right. But where you're kind of looking at it from like a negative standpoint where you're like, oh, I'm this, I'm that, I'm the other, the root of negativity never has any positive impact on life because it's just the natural opposite.
Right.
And so it's that negativity, right? You can have a positive criticism on yourself where you're like, I'm not doing enough, right? Or I'm not doing the right things. That comes from a positive place. The minute it starts to come from a negative place, right? So that's like why you have to really look at the source of any sort of rhetoric that you give to yourself is where does that come from? And
Right.
like, I think to backtrack on the other, what we were talking about in terms of like my generation's mental health problems, I think that comes from a failure in the idealization of Freudian, ideology, where it's like, there was maybe this world because from what I remember, like Freud's main theories on what brings fulfillment in life is based off of pleasure.
Right.
And so, and again, maybe I'm reading a little bit too much into it, and obviously I'm not the most well read on it, but I do think that in that ideology, there's just a general flaw where it's like there's only so much pleasure that you know, you
Right.
can experience in life before things begin to go numb, and that's with a lot of things.
Right.
So, in the generation where we are, and like I remember like growing up as a teenager, what it was like. It was the thing that was idealized. I don't know, obviously by who specifically, but from what I remember seeing in the media and stuff like that, this idealization of pleasure and hedonistic tendencies, right, is what is driving the mental health crisis in my generation because it clearly, right, the hedonism and clearly the mass search for just consistent pleasure, right, has not necessarily yielded the results that people would think. And that's because, again, I think that, pleasure is only temporary and you can only, feel it for a finite period of time. But meaning is really for the infinite. And like I said, like animals, right? Like animals, from at least what we know, like, they want to eat, they want to, relieve themselves and, relieve themselves in other ways. Like, that's all they want to do. They want to survive, right? And humans, I think I'm missing the word for it, but it's when something is useful. That's why you evolve towards that,
Right.
towards that. So like people like a lot of people want to go towards that. Like we do things because it's useful, and like I don't necessarily agree with that in a sense. Like maybe in some regard, in some old world, yes, people will evolve towards something, as people psychologically because that was useful for them. Um, but nowadays, where the world obviously has changed in some regard, like where you're not hunting for food and where your immediate survival isn't threatened. That's humans are in a different, completely different world,
Right.
right? And I mean, you can see that difference in how people view happiness in first world countries versus third world countries.
Right. Right. And so if I'm hearing correctly, what you're saying is that one of the ways that we can better contribute to the mental well-being of your generation is by helping them feel empowered to seek meaning and purpose and not just pleasure. And that, like,
Right. And
happiness is part of the equation, but I think that people don't realize that happiness is a fleeting emotion, right? It's something that is temporary. I saw something on Instagram the other day, like, a meme or something, and someone was like, I'm sure all of my existential needs will now be fulfilled with this latest Amazon purchase. Like,
right.
we're trying to fill we're trying to fill big shoes with things that, are not actually contributing to our long-term well-being.
Right. And like that's the thing is I think people don't really necessarily realize like you are the creator of your own happiness. You can choose to be happy. Like I really firmly believe it's a switch that you can turn on and off. And not in the sense where like I'm gonna like, people I don't want people to say like it's an insensitive thing. As someone who has like literally had to do that, I think if you actually sit down and you decide to be happy, just say today I'm gonna be happy, even if a tough situation comes at you, like you will be a lot better off for it
Right.
because happiness ultimately isn't something that other people can give you. It comes from within. Like I know it's cheesy, but it is legitimately a choice.
It is a choice. And I think if I could add to that, and what I hear you saying is like, it's not that the challenges disappear because you're like, I'm going to be happy today. It's like, no, I'm going to, I'm going to show up to my challenges from this place. Like, choosing to be happy or choosing to be productive, whatever, choosing to find joy in the moment doesn't mean that the challenges that you're facing are going to disappear, right? It's the attitude in which you are facing life with the good times and the
Right.
bad times.
Right. And it's like first off, even because I say these things doesn't mean I'm always like I think it's important to like kind of connect the human aspect because people a lot of times people come on and say stuff on podcasts and then you try to like act like like you're the arbiter of everything. Like I'm not gonna pretend like that always 100% of the time, right, is how I live my life. But I
So,
am going to say in the times where I can get my mind to function correctly, that is how that is what helps. That's what makes it work. Right. Because your biggest enemy and your biggest friend in life is yourself, right? And you basically choose which one you get to be.
right.
And so, like, when you have, everyone will at some point in their life, people do slip and fall into like a victim mindset and a victim mentality, right? You have to catch yourself from falling into that. I think you're the main person who really has to be figuring that out and talking to people on the outside. I think people right in this generation, they talk to a lot of people on the outside, and lots of people on the outside like just tend to justify how they feel. And I'm like, maybe that's not great.
Right.
Maybe like you need to take a look within yourself and like, you know, you need to be the person who your happiness stems from.
Mm,
And so, in that regard, like it's difficult. I obviously know it's difficult, but you have to go have the mindset where like things happen for me, things don't happen to me.
mm,
And I think, because, in the moment, it always feels like, why is this happening to me? But
right.
like, like maybe a couple months or 5 months or a year, 10 years down the line, you're like, oh, this happened for me. And it's
Right.
like,
Right. To help us grow, because that's the reason we are here is to evolve. We're not supposed to stay the same as how we came into the world. We're
right,
meant to change.
right.
Yeah. Sam, do you have a message of hope and encouragement for anyone who's listening right now who is struggling to have that attitude, to show up for their life, to have a good relationship with themselves?
Yeah. I think you should just look at yourself as the main character in life. Don't look at the other people and wonder how are they doing this, how are they doing whatnot. You can take inspiration from people, sure, but like don't think nobody else who's like don't think anybody who's successful isn't going through any of the same mental challenges that you are,
Yeah.
right? And if not, they may even be going through more. Like just look at yourself and present yourself to yourself as normal. Like there's nothing wrong with you. I feel like people like do overdiagnose nowadays. Like there's nothing wrong with you. Your brain is wired to be a specific way because you are wired to do a specific thing, right? Just because your mind thinks differently or acts differently or has trouble focusing in certain areas or on certain subjects doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you. It just means like people are like nowadays like are just wired to see deficiencies, but they always miss the strengths that come,
Mm,
right? And like, I was talking to my mom about this thing. Some people have it in their brain chemistry where like it's hard to focus on like what they need to do, right? And they'll become forgetful and stuff like that. Like of little things. But like when it comes to like something they have to laser focus on, like they're really good at laser focusing on that one thing. Right. And it's like, yeah, because your brain was built to do that. Right. It's not that something is wrong with you. You just can't sit in school, and that's fine. Not everyone's meant to sit in school. Not everyone's meant to be an academic. Not every right. Like people are made to be different. And like I'm kind of tired of like this whole societal thing where it's like, oh yeah, you have to be one way, because it makes zero sense to me. Right. Like people are naturally different, and because people are naturally different, their mind and their experiences and everything that goes on. Being a football player, I've learned a lot about the brain, a lot about brain chemistry. Ironically, people's minds function so different, and there's so many different stimuluses that contribute to those things. Where it's like you just have to focus on yourself, because you are realistically, you are the only person that matters, right? And in your own universe. I fully believe that. It's important to be a good, kind, compassionate person, and to be good to people, and to help other people propagate change in their own life, or bring good things to other people, make other people happy. But at the end of the day, I do firmly believe that like you're the main character in your own video game.
And that the most important relationship that you will have is with yourself. So make sure it's one that feels good.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And like place I get that is from like an Ethics of Our Fathers in Pirkei Avot, when it says like every person should like, say that the world was created for me.
Right.
Like I firmly believe it. That is the truth. And
right.
like I'm the only person who sees through my own eyes. So I'm the only person who can verify that I exist.
And choose my own path.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. But like there is a way to the world. Just because you're the only, you theoretically are the only person that exists, doesn't mean that you get to be bad to everybody else you come into contact with, or do things that are only in your own benefit, right? Because there is a way that everything operates. But I think that like in that pursuit, people do have to understand like you are living your own life. You have to focus on the things that you have to do, the things that you have to accomplish. And obviously it's important to help other people and be a kind person. You also have to understand everything that you are given is for your success. So like everything is inherently granted to you for a reason.
Sammy, thank you so much for doing this with me. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. Thank you for tuning in to Heart. If you or someone you love is struggling, please know there is hope, and help is within reach. Since 2019, the Long Short Road has been walking alongside at-risk individuals, offering trauma-informed programs, a non-emergency hotline, and a community that fosters healing. No one has to go through this alone, and we are here for you. Discover how the Long Short Road is changing lives. Visit www.thelongshortroad.com or email us at info@thelongshortroad.com to learn more. You can be part of this mission. Sponsorship opportunities for Heart are available. Honor a loved one, support your community, and help us make mental wellness resources accessible to those who need them most. Until next time, remember, love and connection are the greatest healers. This is Lee Yaffe reminding you, hope is here, healing is possible, and you are never alone. Together, we're walking this long, short road to a brighter future.